Hey everyone, my name's Jason. I'm a community manager at Coffee Stain Studios, and you've seen the thumbnail and title, and I think we've probably given it away at this point, but that's right. In Update 8, we are moving Satisfactory from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5. How exciting! Yay! Woo! This is something that we've sort of been back and forth on and try to dance around a little bit on live streams when people ask these questions. And we're really glad to be able to talk about this video now, because it was getting to the point on streams where it was like, well, we say we're not sure if we're doing it or not, which was technically true, but then it got to a point where we're like, we're kind of sure, but we can't leak it, okay? So we're getting this video out of the way, and now we can just talk openly about it. But yeah, no, we were investigating this for quite some time, and we weren't sure for the longest time if we were going to be committing to this change or not, but hey, this video's here. So Unreal Engine 5 is coming for Satisfactory. So yeah, this news is likely very exciting to hear, and for good reason, as you'll see throughout this video as we talk about it. It is exciting, but there is a couple of housekeeping things that you need to know before we go on. The first thing that I want to do is set expectations off the bat. When we release Update 8 on Experimental, it will be really, really experimental, okay? So we're transitioning, from Unreal Engine 4 to like a major upgrade to the next major version of the engine, which will be Unreal Engine 5.1.1. And so with that, there's gonna be some growing pains. So, if Experimental was experimental before, at launch, it's gonna be really, really experimental, okay? And of course, like, what our hope is that, like, when we, things seem fine to us internally, but we suspect that when we put it out to you guys, and there's gonna be bajillion people playing the game, you guys will come across any issues that were missed. And so please give us feedback on the QA site, questions.satisfactorygame.com, and we're going to use that feedback to make sure we can plug all the holes in Unreal Engine 5 and make sure that the game returns to be really, really stable. Right now, things seem fine, okay? There's no reason why we feel confident that we can put it out there, otherwise we wouldn't do it, right? But, like, past experience has taught us that when it goes out to everyone else, any issue that can happen will happen, and then we'll hear about it, and there's no amount of testing in-house we can do that can really protect us against that, okay? So, just setting expectations. It should be fine, but there's a risk that things will be up and down. The second thing I want to talk about is, if you're gonna give Unreal Engine 5 a go on Experimental when Update 8 launches, please back up your saves. I don't have any reason that Unreal Engine 5 will break your saves, but whenever we make these changes, it's really important that you back up your saves, because if something happens where your hardware is not compatible with Unreal Engine 5, or if there's just some bug in our code and that stops you from playing, and or it gives you crashes later, but you've already saved over your save files, then you may not be able to downgrade back to the early access version, which will be running Unreal Engine 4, and you really don't want to play those kind of games, okay? So make sure you back up your save file before this happens, just as a safety precaution, okay? Now, we do have a lot that we're going to talk about today, so I'm going to actually add at the end of the video, like a TLDR or a TLDW, I suppose, in this case, section at the end of the video. So if you don't want all of these details, if you want to know, like, what does this mean? What does it mean? What happens? What are the cliff notes? We should have timeline chapters again, but if you're interested in all the details, keep watching and we'll work through it all together. Now, I'm going to break this video down into two major sections. The first section is going to be, I'm going to talk about the new features that come with Unreal Engine 5 that we're going to be implementing, also the ones that we're not going to be implementing. And then the second part of this video will be more about, like, well, what are the implications of this? What does it mean for stability? What does it mean for performance? DirectX 11, what about mods, dedicated servers, etc.? What does that mean for all these other things, okay? So those are the two sections that we're going to kind of talk about things. So first of all, let's get into the new features. So the three big features that, like, are kind of like on everyone's consciousness when we think of Unreal Engine 5, especially like gamers as well, like not game developers, but gamers as well, is things like Lumen, Nanite, or VSM, which is the virtual shadow maps. So, like, these are the things that when people think of Unreal Engine 5, that this is what you get with it, and it's going to make everything so much better, okay? So let's talk about what are they, first of all. The first thing is Lumen. So what is Lumen? Lumen is a global illumination system in Unreal Engine 5, and global illumination is kind of what it sounds like. It's a bit confusing, but it's basically the system that calculates, like, how lights bounce around the world and all that kind of stuff, and how it calculates reflections and things like that. That's what global illumination. Jesus. That's what global illumination means in this context, okay? And so Lumen is a new system for that, which provides better lighting and reflections and things like that. Nanite is another technology that's with Unreal Engine 5 that is a different kind of rendering method that doesn't follow the conventional method of how we render whole meshes in video games, or how we render in video games, which is typically how we would take a whole mesh and we would actually render the entire mesh. You wouldn't see it all, obviously, because some things will block things, but like we'd be working with the whole mesh, which is the conventional way of doing it if I really simplify things. But what Nanite will do is instead it only renders and like works with the relevant clusters of a model in the viewport. And so this is like basically just means that there's huge performance gains if you can use Nanite, I suppose, because we don't have to work with the whole mesh and render the whole mesh. We just have to render the parts that are relevant, okay? That's what Nanite does. VSM, or virtual shadow maps. What VSM does is basically just a memory-efficient shadow drawing technique, allowing higher res shadows and allowing for more post-processing shadow effects, which can be, you know, great for things like art direction and, you know, just look better in general, right? Which of these are we using and which are we not? Do we get any of these? That's great that we know what these are, but do we get them? First of all, VSM, virtual shadow maps, no, we're not using them. So Epic had deemed VSM to be beta, and so that, you know, the fact that the technology is in beta, in combination of not having time to really look into things, means that that means VSM actually fell quite low on the priority list, and so we will not be having VSM in Satisfactory for update 8. It's not impossible that we won't have it in the future. You know, we might, but we're not committing to anything. Okay, that's just, yeah, no VSM for update 8. That's all that matters. As for Nanite, will we have Nanite? Yes, we will. We're going to be trying to have Nanite on rocks and cliffs for update 8, pending any issues that we may run into between now, the time of recording, and the upcoming weeks. And we will try to have Nanite on factory elements as well, but that may or may not come with update 8. Like if it comes, it might come later. But it also may not come at all right? It all depends on how things work out. But that's the intention we have when it comes to Nanite in Satisfactory. As for Lumen, so this is a bit different. Okay, so we will have Lumen in Satisfactory for update 8, okay? But we are not going to support it officially. We're going to offer the option to people to opt into Lumen if they want to try it and if they have the hardware to support it. But what we mean by not officially supporting it is that, like, development-wise, we're not going to have time to flesh out the entire world to be properly lit with Lumen to the way that we want it to be, and also prepare the world to be lit without Lumen. Okay, so we can't. That's kind of the bottleneck there. We don't really have time to properly light both and make them both in accordance to like our visual style that we want and our art direction and how we want things to look. Okay, so we're not going to craft the world with Lumen in mind, but we will give you the option to turn Lumen on or off, and you can use it if you want to use it. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. The video setting will be called GI, or Global Illumination, in the video settings in the game. Next thing that I want to talk about with this Unreal Engine 5 upgrade is there's a new system called the World Partition system, okay? And so there's a question here, will we be using the World Partition system? And the answer is yes, we will. And it makes sense to, okay? So World Partition system is something that helps with how levels stream in and are really good for open world games. Satisfactory is an open world game, and so we have investigated, looked into it, and we're gonna be using it. So currently, in the version of Satisfactory that y'all are playing right now, in Unreal Engine 4, the map has been split up in a 7x6 grid, I believe, of tiles, right? And the map is really big, and so a 7x6 grid of tiles means those tiles are massive. They're absolutely massive. And you all know, as players of the game, that when you approach the bounds of a tile, there's a small hitch, and we have to load in the entire next tile so that you can move through that tile, right? Now, this is really inefficient because if you think about it, we're actually loading in a whole bunch of assets that aren't actually relevant to you, right? So when you walk up to a tile and you're at the front of a tile, we're loading literally everything, including the stuff at the far side of the tile that you can't even see or interact with. Like, that's irrelevant to you, right? So this is fairly inefficient. We're loading so many assets that don't matter to you at that point. We're doing it all in one go, and so there's a hitch. And this also means that without our workflow, the way that worked before, was that all of those assets that we put down, the actors, right, that we put down in the world on those tiles, they were tied to the tile, right? So if we ever wanted to render those things, trigger them, anything, we had to load the entire tile, and there was no way to work with those actors independent of the tile. However, now, with the world partition system in Unreal Engine 5, we've moved away from the actors on the tiles being tied to the tile to becoming just like a file per actor thing. So the actors are actually independent of tiles, and they're actually, if anything, they're just tied to like the location in the world that they are. And so like when we're developing the game, every actor on the map has a file in the file system, and so we can sort of, this gives us more sort of flexibility in how we work and do things. However, that won't be the case for you guys. When the game gets cooked and built, everything will be sort of cooked down to what it needs to be, right? Now, what this means is if those actors aren't tied to the tile anymore, and that instead they're tied to a location, it means that we have a much more flexible system now to actually break up the map into smaller tile chunks, and we can experiment with those tile chunks, and we can quickly and easily decide, well, what tile size and tile chunk, you know, setup is most efficient for Satisfactory. Before, this was virtually impossible because to change a tile size, we had to rework a whole bunch of stuff and move assets and all this. We had to manually do that and then test whether or not it works or not. And then if it doesn't, we would have to like do all of it again and then test if it works. Now, we can just very quickly, by changing some parameters, affect how big the tile size is. It doesn't affect the actors that are out on the map, and we can just more quickly tune our tiling system and world streaming system to be what's most effective for Satisfactory. Another thing that helps us with is previously, whenever we wanted to make any changes to any part of the world, we would have to check out an entire tile, change those actors, and then submit those tiles, which meant large chunks of the map couldn't be worked on simultaneously, and they ran into issues. There was like a lot of like, we needed to like roll back fixes and merge things because people on different branches. It was a complete nightmare, and this gets rid of all of that for us. So this helps us so much in development, and the result will be a much smoother experience for you guys, we believe. And so how do these tweaks kind of work, and how would this tech sort of work? So like if we can find a sweet spot when it comes to tile size, it means that we can find a way to stream in only the stuff that's relevant to you, wherever you are on the map, which means we will stream in parts of the map more often, but it'll be less data. So the expectation or the intention is that there will be no hitches, or smaller hitches, hopefully no hitches, since less data needs to be loaded in. If we finely tune what loads in and when, and if we're really careful with the way we do our loading, our level of details with models and things like that, our goal that we're striving for is potentially to have the whole world landscape visible if you're like really high up and looking down, as opposed to just these big tiles that are missing if you get rid of the fog. And it means we can maybe even lighten the fog so that we can allow you to see further and things like that. So this feature is huge and will make a huge impact on the player experience. It'll help us a bunch with development. Oh, and it might even fix, there was like a performance issue that some people had where if they happen to build their factories near the edges of tiles, this would just create certain situations where basically things would hitch and stutter more often, and would be very sort of inefficient. And this sort of does away with that issue as well. So, and there was no way for people to know if they were near a tile or edge of a tile or not. So this feature is honestly quite a godsend for us and for Satisfactory, and I think everyone is going to benefit so much from it. This is the thing that I'm most excited about personally. The next major feature that's coming with Unreal Engine 5 that we are taking advantage of is TSR, or Temporal Super Resolution. And so TSR is basically just an upscaling algorithm to make lower resolutions appear crisp at higher resolutions with generally little to no loss of quality. But this means major performance gains because you're rendering less pixels at a smaller resolution, but then you get to still like experience the higher quality that you wanted initially. And this is very similar to NVIDIA's DLSS and AMD's Fidelity FX. It's the same kind of thing. There will be a setting in the game to choose what percentage you wish to downscale your resolution to. So you can hopefully you'll have a lot of control there to find what works best for your system. If you have a good GPU, we recommend to use this, since I think it's because like a lot of our game is CPU bound, and so if you can offload more stuff towards the GPU, then you're just going to get more bang for your buck and maybe even relax your CPU a little bit. But if your GPU can't handle this kind of thing, then it's better to not use TSR. It's probably not going to help you. Okay. We're also adding, right? This isn't TSR, but we're also adding FXAA, which is fast approximate anti-aliasing, which is a cheaper anti-aliasing alternative for people who are running on lower spec machines. This is in addition to temporal anti-aliasing, which is what we currently have in the game. So you still have the regular anti-aliasing that y'all have been using. You will hopefully be able to have TSR as well if you can use it. And if you have lower spec machines, you can also try FXAA, which will hopefully give you better performance as well. The next big feature that's coming with Unreal Engine 5 is going to be vehicles updates, physics updates, you guys. Unreal Engine 5 deprecated the previous physics module that we used for physics in Satisfactory in Unreal Engine 4, but instead, we're now using the Chaos physics system, which should be much, much better. The entire vehicle physics system has been remade, which means when you jump in game and you use these vehicles, things may feel different, okay? But they should still be fine. They should still be good, but the vehicles may feel a little different now. We think they feel better, but you know, at the end of the day, it's up to you guys. You can always give us your feedback, whether you like them or not. I know that, like, you know, when people get like change, sometimes they don't like the change right away. If you don't like it right away, maybe give it a little bit. Just give it a little bit, right? Give it a chance and see if you still don't like it. And if you don't like it, let us know on the QA site, okay? But give it a chance, okay? Now, this update should not impact automation and self-driving, because when the way that the game works right now with vehicles is that if you're really far away from them, actually their physics turn off and they just kind of move along a spline and just kind of float between the waypoints. So this shouldn't make a difference to that. It may make a difference if you're close to them. You may notice if you're constantly close to certain vehicles, and with the physics change and the retuning of the vehicles, that if they can't complete certain paths, then they may be more inefficient and you may need to re-record some paths. This really shouldn't make much of an impact when it comes to automation and self-driving. One other issue that has been highly reported on the QA side is that the vehicles bounce and stuff on foundations. Well, I'm happy to report that with this change, that the vehicles now drive buttery smooth, according to our programmers, on foundations. But there are some sloped foundations that still have some weird janky issues, but those are not issues with the vehicles. It may be issues with the collisions of those foundations. This may or may not be addressed for update 8, but generally speaking, they should perform better on foundations now. We have also noticed a bit of a difference when it comes to random physics bugs, like where things send you off flying into space. But we still think that like game TM physics, where weird shit happens, is probably still in the game. But we do think that there has been a big improvement, but you guys let us know. Let us know, okay? As I mentioned before, vehicles have actually been tuned a little bit, right? So things have changed quite, well, I said a little bit. I think they've changed maybe quite a lot. So there's been changes to top speed and handling on the vehicles. Trucks now feel less bouncy than before. They feel more heavy and they've got more mass, which I know is something that people have actually given us a lot of feedback and didn't like before. Explorer feels a little bit more zippier now and has a bit more of a tendency to oversteer, so maybe a little harder to control, but if you can get used to it, you're better off. The Sugar Cube is a little bit more stable and a bit faster, we believe, and the Factory Cart is now less prone to flipping over. I think it has its center of mass is like a little lower now, but it still handles poorly on everything but foundations. That is a design choice on our part. We want it to work well on foundations and not well anywhere else, okay? So that is staying as it is, okay? The handbraking system, which is a spacebar by default on keyboard, has been improved. Now, before it was all previously faked with like fake forces on the vehicle, but now we actually simulate a handbrake, so that should be a little bit better. You may have known that previously there was like air control on the vehicles. Now, this is not something that we saw a lot of people really making use of or taking advantage of. But you could do like sick backflips and like 360 pop shove-its, you know, off a park bench. That's a joke that only one person understands that joke. Why did I say it? Anyway, you could do cool sick stuff with air control before, but no one's really using it. And so actually that's been removed. If you don't like that, if you want air control back, let us know. But for now, it's been removed, okay? Vehicles also have new sounds, you guys, okay? This has nothing to do with physics, but when driving them, when you drive the vehicles, there will now be sounds per wheel. So as the wheels you know, not all the wheels spin and are under the same conditions as each other, and so the sounds should reflect that, and overall it should just sound a little bit more natural. The sounds will also better match the actual engine of the vehicle as well. When not driving vehicles, so vehicles like automated driving around, or a friend is driving a vehicle and, you know, you're watching them, we still use simpler sounds in those cases for optimization purposes. One thing to mention here is that these physics changes do not impact trains at all. One other new feature that's coming with Unreal Engine 5 is the enhanced input system. The enhanced input system is just another kind of input system. I don't actually know too much about the details of it, but from what I understand, it's easier for us to work with. So development-wise, when we're creating new features, there's like this context system now with input, so that like we can define certain inputs depending on the context. So for example, one key might do something while you're walking around, but the same key might do something if you're in a vehicle, or if you have a jetpack equipped or something like that. And what this means for you guys is that we actually have some input bugs in the game, and this should iron out those input bugs. One example is, I think if you hold space while in a hover pack or something, or jetpack, and then you open up a menu, and you let go of space, that space persists and you keep flying. You know, things like that will hopefully be ironed out. And it may also result in potentially more granular key binding options for you guys, for the player as well. So some benefits there with the input system. One other, I think, new feature that has come to Unreal Engine 5 is like the meta sounds feature or something for audio, all right? It's another like audio feature. I just wanted to let you guys know we're not making use of this. We currently use Wise for our audio authoring stuff, and we're continuing to just use Wise for that. Okay, so those are the new features that have come, and we've talked about what we're going to be using and what we're not going to be using. So what is the implication of this over various things in the game? So let's go through certain topics that might be of interest to you guys. The first question that people might ask is, are there going to be performance increases? Is the game going to run better now? This is this sort of depends on how you sort of define things, because you could say, well, if I got 60 FPS before and the game, if I turn on extra things and it looks better and it still runs at 60 FPS, it's like you're not necessarily getting more performance, but then you're getting more quality, right? So it all depends on how you sort of like weigh this kind of stuff up. But basically, we think that Nanite will reduce CPU overhead, as the occlusion is partially done on the GPU. So people who were CPM before, maybe you will get performance improvements, better FPS. There will hopefully be gains when it comes to anti-aliasing, because there's FXAA for lower spec machines now, which should be more performant than the temporal anti-aliasing that was in the game before. So that's an option for people with lower specs, but also for people who have beefier GPUs, you may be able to take advantage of TSR if we do get that in, and get maybe more frames and better quality through that. Okay, so you might get some gains there. Now, one other thing to sort of consider here is what performance gains do we have now, and what performance gains will we have in the future now that we're switching to Unreal Engine 5. And the thing is, if we're talking about now at the time of recording, what we've actually observed is that the performance is actually the same or worse. Okay, so right now on our high spec machine, when we profile that, we're actually at a 1 millisecond loss. But the thing is, all of this is without the tweaks that we now have at our disposal to do. Okay, we have these tweaks that we can now do, and we haven't done them yet. And so we think that anything can change between now and Update 8 launch. Maybe things will improve between then and experimental launch. Maybe things will improve from experimental to early access, and then maybe things will improve again beyond that as we take full advantage of the engine. Okay, so right now, I don't think you should. I think it would be unfair and unwise and unreasonable for us to say, hey, everything's going to be better now. But your mileage may vary. Maybe it will be better for you. Maybe it'll be a little worse for you. If it isn't good, let us know. Let us know what's happening, what kind of drops you got. Go to the QA site, let the team know. Otherwise, they can't help you. Otherwise, they can't fix these things, okay? So let us know. We really intend to work with you guys through the experimental period to make sure we can iron out as much as we can. Next question on people's minds will probably be stability. Is it going to be more stable now on Unreal Engine 5? Or is it going to be stable at all, really, on launch? Right now, at the time of recording, we're hoping that at the pace that we're at, things should be stable for the experimental release. Our game code is largely the same. It's just mostly the engine that has changed, but you never know. That's still a big change, and there might be issues. But it is entirely possible that there are some Unreal Engine 5 related issues that we were unable to catch in-house, or with our external QA testing agency. We have that as well. And that, like, there's just no replacement for putting the game out there, out in the wild with you guys to see what you guys catch, okay? So So far, we think it's fine, like I was talking about before, but we never know what's going to happen when we give it to, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. So, yeah. And so the areas that we anticipate that might have some stability issues would be areas that have been reworked, for example, vehicles, that's a contender. But if you do run into issues with stability during the experimental period, the old version of the game, Unreal Engine 4 version of the game, will still be on early access. So remember to back up your saves, test out the game, make sure it's stable for you before committing to your save files. And if it doesn't work out, switch back to early access and load your backed up saves, okay? Another question that some people might have, like another implication of this change could be whether or not this affects hardware requirements. And I can say for sure that we will be upping our minimum spec for the game. One of the reasons we're upping the minimum spec is that first of all, the minimum spec GPU that we had listed, there's no longer driver support for that for that lowest spec GPU anymore. So that's one reason. You know, NVIDIA doesn't even support that GPU anymore. So we don't want to support that GPU anymore. The other reason is that the current low spec GPU was unreasonably low in the opinions of the team. The GTX 770 is a 10-year-old card, and the only reason we went with it was not for any reasonable or educated reason. It was like we just kind of had it. We just had it in the office. So like, this will be our minimum. We'll just shoot for this. But now that we're putting a little bit more thought into it, we think that supporting that card or anything around that is unreasonably low, and we don't want to shoot for that anymore. Now, I do have some preliminary new minimum specs. Preliminary minimum spec is going to be the GTX 1650, 4-core CPU, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and sort of an SSD. Now, this is kind of a weird requirement because technically speaking, the game will probably run on a regular hard drive and not an SSD, and I guess that's what minimum means. So like, I guess a regular hard drive would still work. But the thing is, Nanite greatly relies on write speed. Okay, and so an SSD is super recommended also by Epic. So we need to do a little bit more testing on this before we can be certain, but at this stage, we think that running on an SSD might be required. But yeah, anyway, these are the specs that we have for now. Anything is subject to change. You can let us know what you think about these specs in the comments below. Are they bananas? Who knows? Okay, let us know. This brings us to the next point. Is DirectX 11 still supported? Yes, DirectX 11 we will still support DirectX 11, but DirectX 11 does not support Nanite. Okay, and so Unreal Engine 5 has a fallback system for this, so hopefully we can make use of that and continue to support DirectX 11, but we'll see, but the intention is that we will. But our minimum spec GPU supports DirectX 12, and so we consider DirectX 12 to be more stable than DirectX 11. We know of certain issues that DirectX 11 has that we cannot solve, and so we recommend that if your GPU supports DirectX 12, you should use DirectX 12. That is actually the default in the game now as well. And if there's there's little to no reason not to use DirectX 12 at this point, but if there are any bugs or any issues or any reason you can't use DirectX 12, then we recommend you trying Vulkan. And then if that doesn't work, try DirectX 11 as a last resort. Also, make sure your drives are up to date before you start switching them, because it could be that if DirectX 12 isn't working well for you, you don't have up-to-date drivers, that can make a big difference, okay? So make sure you get the latest drivers. One other thing to mention whenever we talk about this stuff is that if you mess with your graphics renderer in the game menu, and you select one that your hardware does not support and the game crashes, and that saves, it means the game will crash every time you open, and you can no longer open the game, and you can no longer change those settings back to something that does work again. Some people have run into that issue before. Now, what you can do is you can delete your game user settings.ini file, and that will delete your settings and restore them back to default the next time you open the game. That'll send it back to DirectX 12. That file is located it's in the config folder, kind of by your save files. I'll leave its file path in the description down below, but another method that you can use is to use launch options to force a specific graphics renderer, so you don't have to revert all your settings back to default. That's probably the better option. Now, that can be a little complicated for some people if you don't know how to do it, so I'm going to leave information in the description for that as well, so that you can use launch options to force a graphics renderer. Go back in the game, change the settings, and then you can get rid of the launch option afterwards, okay? The next thing people will probably be asking is, what about the build limit? Has Unreal Engine 5 fixed the build limit? So for those of you who don't know, there's actually a limit to how many U objects you can have in the game, in Unreal Engine. Okay, this limitation is not imposed by us. It's just kind of hard coded into the engine, unfortunately. And now what a U object is it's not what you and I think of an object in Satisfactory is. A U object is an object that's under the hood of the engine. And it means an Unreal object, Unreal Engine object, and that does not necessarily represent one object in game. So for example, a constructor is one object that we know of, right? But it can be made up of multiple Unreal objects, U objects. For example, there could be the constructor mesh itself, there could be the animated arms, that could be another U object, the input and outputs could be other U objects, the ladders on the sides could be U objects as well. So a constructor is made up of many U objects, and things like foundations are as well. Even a foundation is not just one U object. Or historically has not been. We'll get to that. But one thing that I want to make super clear is that this issue affects very, very few people. Like, I'm going to pull a number out of my butt and say, like, it doesn't even concern 99% of players. I don't know if that number's right, but it affects, like, very, very, very few people. But it affects some people, okay? Unfortunately, Unreal Engine 5 will not resolve this build limit issue that we've previously have. And in fact, there is no change with that issue in Update 8. However, on the plus side, there has been a change recently to this issue, which I'm not even sure if we talked about, but we should have. We should have talked about it. Actually, in Update 7, the previous update, there was actually a change that was made by us, which went a long way to addressing this build limit issue. And we did that with something called abstract instances, which greatly reduces the number of U objects that are on the map. So for example, a single foundation before would have been made up of 3 U objects, the actor itself, the root component, and the proxy mesh. But as of Update 7, with these abstract instances, they can just be one foundation is one U object, all right? And so you can see how huge of an impact that can have with regards to the object limit in the game. It allows, so that update allows y'all to build more. It doesn't move the object limit, but it allows you to build more and still stay within the object limit. It also improved save times, load times, and improved like memory reduction as well. We also have some other ideas of what we can do to continue to further improve the situation with the object limit, but nothing is set in stone for that regarding that, and nothing more will be done for it in Update 8. Okay, so that's the status of the object limit. Next thing you might be wondering is, well, what's going to happen with mods? Are mods going to work with Unreal Engine 5? No shot. There's no way. So like whenever we updated engine versions before, that would break mods. For this update, Update 8, it's a major update for the game, major upgrade with the engine as well. There's no chance mods are going to work right now. They will not work for experimental launch. Now, the thing is that mods and mod support is not something that is handled by us. It is unofficial. We do not officially support mods, but it is handled by our community, and they've done an incredible job creating amazing tools for modding, and there's a plethora of mods out there. And as always, this happens every single time. Mods break after major launches, and then it's up to those mod creators in the modding community to make the changes necessary to support the game again, and then those mods come back online again. We anticipate a longer downtime for mods because of this upgrade, but I'm sure the modding community will do the best they can to get them back online as soon as possible. If you run into any crashes that, if you look at the stack trace, the information that pops up on the crash reporter when the game crashes, if you look at that and you see like names of mods and stuff in there, it's likely, the crash is likely because of the mod you used, and that is likely what will happen to many people who use mods when you try to open the game on experimental when Update 8 launches. If that is the case, the best thing to do is not reach out to us, because what we will tell you is you need to go and talk to the mod creator or the modding community, or uninstall the mods completely, right? Clean them out using the mod loader, uninstall using the mod loader, or the mod manager rather. And those are just the things you can do, because we can't actually help you with those things, all right? So if you run into mod-related crashes, go and speak to the modding community or the mod developer. Some people might be wondering, with a big update like this, has there been any changes to dedicated servers? Or will Unreal Engine 5 break the servers? Who knows? What's the deal there? So dedicated servers will remain functional. There will be an experimental branch of the dedicated servers, and they will be running Unreal Engine 5 dedicated servers, okay? And you thought that the dedicated servers, they've been experimental this whole time, and you thought they were experimental before. Yeah, they're gonna be really experimental now, okay? It is likely that the dedicated servers will be less stable than they were before, and I understand that a lot of people were frustrated at the stability and lack of updates that dedicated servers were getting before, and this is gonna suck to hear because this is a downwards trajectory, right? Like, things are getting worse for the dedicated servers. So I can understand frustration and annoyance at that for sure, but I just want to reiterate, we've said this before in the past, dedicated servers will get more love. They will get more work done to them. We have planned to improve features for them on top of ironing out any issues as well. So there will be updates to dedicated servers. I'm sorry that they're not coming for this one, and I'm sorry that things might get a little worse with dedicated servers now, but mark my words, we plan on fixing them. Okay, so yeah. You might be wondering what version of Unreal Engine 5 we're going to be upgrading to. It's going to be Unreal Engine 5.1.1. I think I did mention that earlier, but just putting it out there. You might be wondering, why did we decide to do this change? Isn't it a lot of work? Why did we decide to do that? And the answer is because we're masochists. All right, we're game developers, all right? We hate ourselves. No, but the real reason is that, like, this is future-proofing, we believe. We think it's necessary at some point to do it, and so we might as well just do it now. If we don't do it now, we have to do it later. But if we do it now, then we can get it over and done with and iron things out with you guys in the meantime, okay? So it's probably better to just do it now. There's other features that are, you know, super worth it, like the chaos physics system, Lumen. We think there's going to be long-term performance gains. Also, the world partitioning system is just such a massive gain. Like, why wouldn't we want that, right? That was a huge deciding factor. You might be wondering, how long did it take? It's taken about 4 or 5 months, but initially it was only just a handful of key people who were working on it and investigating it. But then when we got to the point where we were like, yes, we definitely want this, then more people got on board, and then we committed to it. And we made it happen, okay? But in total, it took about 4 or 5 months. Do we think it's worth it? Short term, it depends who you ask, actually. Some people say yes. Some people say, ow, no. No, make it stop, ow. Some people say, owies. For example, a notable one that you guys kind of saw the effects of was a few weeks back, we had to delay one of our teasers because Snoot was trying to take in-game footage. That's what he was dealing with. He was trying to take in-game footage for the teaser trailer, and the shadows were being a pain, and then he fixed that, and then it was just crashing non-stop, and we had other people help him, and it was a complete nightmare, and then the teaser had to get delayed. And so in those cases, does it feel like it's worth it? No, it feels awful, but long-term, we truly do believe that this is the right move. Yeah, long-term, it will really pay off. And so there may be growing pains. There have been growing pains for us internally, and there may be growing pains for you guys on the experimental launch of Update 8. And we'll sort of just see what we can do from that point on. But we think in the end, right, at the end of the day, right, it's going to make for a better game, and that is what is most important, we feel. All right, so that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. But as promised, I'm going to just give a TLDR, because this video has been massive, absolutely massive, okay? And so let's just do a quick TLDR of what this means for Satisfactory and what you guys can expect. So first of all, we anticipate growing pains from the launch of Update 8 on the experimental version of the game, and then we don't know what that ironing out process will be like, but we do expect that, and this also includes dedicated servers. We do, however, believe that this will improve things greatly in the long run. We do believe it is worth it. There are also a slew of new features that come with Unreal Engine 5 that we can take advantage of, so we believe that that is absolutely worth it. And for example, there's going to be better vehicle physics with the Chaos engine. There's going to be more efficient world map streaming with the world partition system. There's going to be better lighting with Lumen for those of you who can take advantage of Lumen. There's going to be better key binding for the player and less input bugs when it comes to that. We also think there's just going to be better fidelity in general when it comes to utilizing Nanite where possible. So yeah, a whole bunch of new features coming with Unreal Engine 5 that we can take advantage of in Satisfactory. Overall, we expect similar or slightly worse performance at the launch of Update 8 Experimental for some folks. But we do expect that after some tweaks tweaks with community feedback that we're actually quite confident that performance will improve over time. However, other new features like Nanite and anti-aliasing options like TSR and FXAA will hopefully be able to be utilized by you guys, and so that you get more bang for your buck when it comes to performance, and hopefully it will mitigate some of your performance issues if you have them. So we'll see how that goes. And finally, we think that mods will for sure break at the experimental launch of Update 8. It is up to the modding community to make the changes they need to their tools and to mods to support the new versions of the game moving forward. If you run into any mod-related crashes, these are not things that we can solve. You will have to go to the modding community or the mod developers themselves and get an update on what's going on there. Okay, so that's the situation with mods. And that's the TLDR. That's all of it in a nutshell. If you want any more information about specifics about what I just said, and you fast forwarded to here, go back and watch the whole video, okay? But in any case, thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you made it to the end, congratulations. I hope you're excited. I hope everything goes as smooth as possible with this launch. But these are bold and brave steps, and I think it's going to be worth it in the end. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like. Thanks, Jace. Helps a lot in the comments. And I will catch you all next time. Have a lovely weekend, and take care. Bye, everyone. All right, now we're done. Holy cow. Holy cow, what a video.